Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this Working Minds campaign event. You're very welcome. HSE has been very pleased at the level of interest in today's event, and thank you for joining. If you were originally going to join on the date that it was set for last month. Today we're going to look at the Working Minds campaign itself, and also to hear from one of our partners on the Working Minds campaign in Lifeline Scotland. I think there was a great deal of interest in this event, partly because work-related stress and mental health at work is in danger of becoming a bit of a crisis for businesses. And mental health issues are the #1 reason given for sickness absence levels in Scotland and in the UK. And I think there are three main reasons employers should be looking at mental health in the workplace and supporting good mental health. And firstly, that's because it's the law under the Health and Safety at Work Act and legislation. Second, because it's good for business. And third, because it's the right thing to do. HSE's Rob McGreal will say a little bit more later on about the sheer scale of the problem and explain what the Working Minds campaign is all about in a bit more detail. HSE, as the regulator, is calling for a culture change across all workplaces to ensure that psychological risks are taken as seriously as physical risks in the workplace, and that they are tackled as well as part of the risk assessment system. The campaign aims to give employers a clear understanding of their legal duties while championing a reduction in work-related stress and promoting good mental health at work. Working Minds provides employers and workers with easy to implement advice, including simple steps in its 5 R's to reach out, recognise, respond, reflect, and to make it routine. Now our campaign, the Working Minds campaign, is complemented by a new online platform developed by partners in Scotland, including the Scottish Government, Public Health Scotland, and a range of other organisations interested in mental health. That platform's called Supporting a Mentally Healthy Workplace, and it's hosted on the Healthy Working Lives website. I'm sure many people in Scotland will be familiar with Healthy Working Lives. Now, as the regulator, HSE can't do all of this alone. And so we've partnered with a number of organisations to highlight the triggers of stress, the legal duties, and how employers can manage the risks. And today is to tell you a bit more about the campaign and the resources that are available to you. And it's about asking for your help too, by becoming a partner or by becoming a champion. I'm hoping there'll be a short time for questions, so please type them in the Q&A and I'll try to direct them to the most relevant panel member later on. The event is being recorded, so those of you who would like to see it again, or those of people who can't make it today, will be able to see it. But first, I'm very pleased indeed that one of our Working Minds partners, Jill Morton from Lifeline Scotland, is here to share her experience and to tell us a bit more about her involvement in the Working Minds campaign. Very welcome, Jill, and thanks very much.
Thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here to tell you about the work the Lifeline Scotland project is doing, which is about supporting the health and the well-being of the emergency service community in Scotland. I think we maybe have some colleagues from the Blue Light services with us today, but I hope that what I talk about for the next 10 minutes will have some relevance for all of you, whatever your work context. I'm a clinician at the River Centre for Traumatic Stress in NHS Lothian, and as well as our work with the general public, for the last 20 years we have supported people whose work role exposes them to potentially traumatic stressors. And that includes obviously the emergency services, but also health and social care workforce and staff working for the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service, just for example. And what we do at the River Centre is we provide evidence-based treatments for people who've been psychologically injured at work. And over the last 20 years, we have learned a lot about what increases or reduces the risk of being injured and what helps people recover. And we're really passionate about this, and that's why we've been so delighted to partner with the Health and Safety Executive on this Working Minds campaign, to kind of share what we've learned, to try and think about how we can address psychological hazards at work. Just going to share my slides now, so bear with me. I'll do that quickly. We've sort of used our clinical experience over this time to kind of set up 2 national projects to support the well-being of the workforce. This one, the National Wellbeing Hub, which was set up in 2020 to support the well-being of the health and social care workforce, and including unpaid carers during the pandemic, and then Lifeline Scotland, which is the one I'm going to talk about with you this afternoon. So Lifelines is funded by the Scottish Government as part of Action 36 of the Mental Health Strategy, that commitment to work with employers to improve mental health. And we're also funded by police, ambulance, fire services, and by the Firefighters Charity. And we work in partnership with all of those interested in supporting the well-being of Scotland's emergency service community. So that includes the charities, the unions, all of the staff bodies. At the River Centre, we have seen how recovery from psychological injury is complicated if we feel confused about why it's happened, or ashamed that it's happened, and or if we feel let down by our employers. So what Lifelines is an attempt to kind of address these issues for individuals and for colleagues, managers and organisations, to share that clinical knowledge and what we know from the research to try and do a better job of helping people stay well at work. What I'm going to do now is show you just a little film that kind of captures what are sort of 10 key messages really that are at the heart of the Lifelines project. Here goes.
We all have mental health, and responders are not invincible.
Emergency responders are at risk of psychological injury. It's an occupational hazard.
Health and safety assessments should include psychological risk.
Getting psychologically injured doesn't mean you're weak or a failure.
Psychological injury is not inevitable. Most responders, most of the time, will cope well.
Psychological injuries can heal.
Stigma stops people getting help.
Workplace stress is as big a threat to responder well-being as trauma exposure.
Good management and leadership protects responders.
Support from colleagues, family and friends keeps responders well.
So those are designed for the blue light community, but I'm sure you can see how some of those principles would apply in your work setting too. What we've done is we've created a range of resources, including this website, which I would encourage you to have a look at. It has lots of information and advice on there for individuals, and it's broken down into the headings: why I'm okay most of the time, when I might need some help, and information for family, friends, and other supporters. And, you know, that might include you. This is the way it's set out. Sorry, I forgot to click that on. But it also might include you if you're someone who employs somebody who volunteers as an emergency responder, whether that's an on-call firefighter, community first responder, special constable, somebody who's within Mountain Rescue. Yeah, we know lots of organisations do these things. The website also has lots of information. It's a kind of one-stop shop for people who might need to find help. That's the individuals themselves or their families. These are both national Scottish providers, but also service-specific resources, and some across the UK. And it hosts this kind of thing on the right-hand side. It's a Staying Well road trip, which you're very welcome to take. It's free and it's on the website, and it takes about 30 minutes where you have a little think about what it is that might keep you well at work and what the threats to that well-being might be. We're working with the Blue Light Services to deliver training on staying well, supporting colleagues, being a good line manager, post-trauma support, and we're crucially working with their internal training teams, because what we want to do is weave this content into the core curriculum. So it's across people's careers, from induction to pre-retirement, as they go into a promoted role, perhaps as they work in a specialist post. And we're also providing consultation and advice to the services on how they can look at their policies and procedures and their mental health strategies to weave an understanding of resilience and well-being into these. So that includes looking at their health and safety risk assessments, but also things like absence management procedures. So here are the 10 essentials again, okay? So we know, and you remember one of the characters in Ian in our little film, focused on the fact that workplace stress, number 8, is as big a threat to well-being as trauma exposure. It's not all about the difficult jobs that our emergency service colleagues attend. And in some ways, this is really good news, isn't it? Because we can't prevent our blue light colleagues having exposure to potentially traumatic material. But if workplace stress is an influential factor, then there are things we can do about that to make sure that we address the things we can. And that number 3 about health and safety assessments, including psychological risk, again, it's why we're so passionate about working with a health and safety executive. And I would ask you, just as we're thinking about this, just to reflect in your workplace, how do these 10 essentials fit for you? Yeah. And specifically whether your health and safety assessments include psychological risk. You know, what are the emotional and psychological hazards faced by your people at work? Do you work in a setting where the public may sometimes be angry or potentially abusive to your staff? Are your staff dealing with people when they're very distressed? You know, whether that's, I think I can think of a colleague I worked with once at Scottish Power who found it very difficult taking calls from people who were very frightened they were going to have their heating cut off. Yeah, just what are the hazards your staff face at work? And as you know, if we can understand what the hazards are, then we can think about what we can do to mitigate those. Yeah, that's the key thing. Because resilience is always a balancing act. Yeah, how our scales are doing is always going to depend on what are the demands that we're facing, what are the threats to our well-being, and what are the resources available to us that we can draw on, what are the things that protect us. And you know, I would encourage you to also think about, as well as thinking about the hazards, think about what are the things that keep your staff well at work. We've thought about this a lot, haven't we, during the pandemic, when we've had to adapt to things like home working and miss some of that kind of important social interaction. What are the things that keep your people well in the workplace? And if you know what they are, you can keep doing those. So just here's what the science tells us about what keeps people well, what human beings need. We sort of think of it as social capital, and you'll see it begins with the basics, needing to be safe, having somewhere to live, having enough money to feed ourselves and our loved ones, having access to healthcare, the importance of social support, which is at the heart of everything really for human beings. And then these other more advanced kind of ideas, I guess, about needing this to be a sense of fairness and justice. But this one's crucial, isn't it? Occupation and a sense of purpose. And it's that idea of good work is good for us, you know, and we want to tell a good news story about how we can keep people well in the workplace. Rob, after me, is going to go on and talk about some of the things in the workplace that can contribute to work-related stress if they're not managed well, so I'll let him cover those. But what we've done at Lifelines is we've taken this idea about what keeps people well a little bit further. So for our emergency service colleagues, many of whom will think, well, I don't know why I'm okay, you know, we'll say, well, it's not an accident that you're okay. There are things that are operating that protect you when you're in your workplace and you're dealing with difficult stuff. And this is what they are: a sense of professional identity. So we have a job to do. You know, we've got a purpose and a clear kind of structure and a reason why we're exposed and involved in something difficult. And what that does is allow us to distance ourselves a little bit, so we're not only having a personal response, we're in professional role. Also, that it's what we've signed up for. You know, it's not an accident if you're in the ambulance service that you find yourself dealing with somebody who's seriously injured or very ill. So there's that expectation and readiness, and also the value of preparation and training. And again, these are cross-sector. I'm talking about them here in the blue lights, but I know they will apply. And then it helps if we feel competent, have a sense of control and agency, again, social support. And it's valuable if, as individuals, we're willing to talk about how we're doing, we're willing to get some support, and we know ourselves well enough to recognise if we're not okay. So it's not only our family members who are picking up if we're more crabbit who tell us that things aren't okay. So those are some of the individual things that work. Then we know that protective teams are these ones. They look out for each other, they have each other's backs, they've got a shared sense of purpose, there's respect and trust, there's role clarity and confidence that we're all in this together, and I know what you're doing and you can trust what I'm doing, that we have the resources and the training that we need. And then again, these softer skills about we know each other, this is our work family, and we accept and tolerate different personalities and sort of coping styles, and that we have good communication. And the protective organisations have all of these things: respected leadership, they're coming up randomly, sorry. It's adequate resourcing, shared sense of purpose, good communication, hard work is recognised and appreciated. And as well as feeling valued, there is an acceptance, and this is the value of making sure your health and safety assessments include psychological risk. That we're not constantly talking about mental health as this slightly abstract thing, but we think about how our workplace affects our psychological well-being, that we just make that conversation matter of fact. And if we're working in a role where there is a potential of psychological injury, that we are pragmatic about that, do what we can to prevent it, but also if people do get injured, we make it easy for them to get the support they need if they do. So we became a kind of Working Minds partner because we want you to think about health and safety in this inclusive way, you know, physical and psychological health and physical and psychological safety. So I'm just going to finish up now, but in the spirit of partnership, because you may be aware of some of these resources or you may not, but Scotland has a wealth of things that are happening. So Sarah's already referred to the Healthy Working Lives platform and this new web resource, which is about supporting a mentally healthy workplace. There is also the opportunity for your staff to train as mental health first aiders. The Public Health Scotland site has got, that was paused during the pandemic, but those courses are now running again. You may want to learn more about how to support somebody at risk of suicide. The Scottish Government has a huge campaign to try and address the suicide statistics for Scotland. So there are these brilliant wee films that you can see over in the kind of bottom left of your screen that are kind of awareness raising, just quick 4-minute animated films that are brilliant, or you can sign up to the United to Prevent Suicide campaign. Scotland has always also made a commitment to being a trauma-informed nation. So our colleagues at NHS Education for Scotland are rolling out a national trauma training programme. Again, there are online resources here, there are free courses being delivered. And what we've done on the Lifelines website is, because there's an awful lot of stuff going on, we have collated all of these mostly free courses that are available that are delivered either by Public Health Scotland or by NHS Education for Scotland into what we call our learning toolkit. So please have a look at that. There's a ton of resources out there if you and your teams want to kind of get some more information about this. In addition to that, there are these other brilliant resources. NHS Inform has recently launched this Mind to Mind site, which is aimed at the public. And so what it has is people sharing their experiences of having difficulties with anxiety or depression or struggling with grief and what helped them. So it's very much kind of messages from people who've been there, been through this, come out the other side. So again, it's a brilliant resource I would encourage you to use. And you may know about this, but if you're a small company with kind of less than 250 employees, you can also find information about Working Health Services Scotland, again on the NHS Inform website. They provide free and confidential occupational health support really to small organisations. So you can find out about all of these resources and the advice and support I was talking about on the website. Again, you may not be a blue light service, but I think there'll be lots of it that's relevant and it's open access. And we've recently published an evaluation of some of the work we've been doing, so you can access that evaluation report if you're interested in having a look at that. Yeah, so thank you. It's been great being part of this event today. I'll look forward to answering any questions that you have after the next presentation. And I'm going to hand over now to Rob, who's going to talk to you a bit more about the HSE campaign. Thanks.
Hi, thanks, Jill. My name's Rob McGreal, and as Jill said, I'm going to be talking a bit more about what stress is, what the level of impact is, and a little bit about the campaign and what the campaign's designed to do, and how we're using it to help get our messages to audiences that we probably couldn't have done before. So I'll just share my screen so you can see the slides. I'm using a new computer, so it might take a couple of seconds. Apologies. There you go. So first of all, what do we mean by stress? What do we mean by mental health issues? And what do we mean by anxiety, depression, and all the things that with the psychological risks that people are likely to be exposed to at work? The definition we use for stress, and when we talk about stress, we're generally talking about stress, anxiety, and depression as a group. Stress is all about the adverse reaction a person has to excessive pressures and other types of demands placed on them. So the definition actually draws a differentiation between what is stress and what is pressure. Pressure is when you've got a target to do and you know you've got to get it done by a certain date. It puts that little bit of impetus in it, puts that little bit of pressure on you, it makes you more motivated to do the work. And when you've got one of those tasks, when you're doing one task where you've got to have it done by the end of the week, at the end of that week, if you've had a little bit of pressure, you get the opportunity to recover from it. Stress is when you've got a pressure after a pressure after a pressure, and you don't get that recovery time. You don't get the opportunity to actually take that breath, lean back and say, right, okay, that's that job done, what's next? And that kind of pressure builds up and it can lead to all kinds of conditions. It can lead to physical and mental health conditions. So when we talk about stress, anxiety and depression, it's a progression. So you can go from having stress to being anxious and having depression. But you can also have severe conditions that are physical conditions. So work-related stress has been linked to things like heart conditions. It's been linked to things like diabetes, to digestive problems and all those kind of things. But in the introduction, we were talking, Sarah was talking about why we're doing this, why we're looking at this kind of thing. Why should you tackle work-related stress? It's somebody else's problem, isn't it? Well, actually, it isn't, because you have a legal duty as an employer to look after your employees. Section 2 of the Health and Safety at Work Act requires it. So you've got to do something. If you recognise that your people are stressed or having problems, or if you should recognise that your people are having problems, then you really need to do something about it. Again, as Sarah said, it's the proper thing to do. Nobody goes into work to be injured, and I'm fairly sure most employers don't take on staff to do those to injure them. It's a cooperation, it's a partnership. We do what we need to do to get money in to support our family. As Jill was saying, it's one of the hierarchy of needs. You start off with being comfortable, your family being comfortable, having somewhere to live and something to eat. So it's the right thing to do morally. But the primary reason that employers should be doing something about it is it's good for the business. If you think about the costs that are incurred by sickness absence due to work-related stress, the figures are quite high. You'll see in the next slide that it's significant numbers. It's more than half of the working days lost to sickness are due to work-related stress, anxiety and depression. So these are savings that you as an employee can make. If your people are not going off sick, you're not having to pay those costs. If they're not going off sick, you don't have to pay overtime for people to cover it. If they're not going off sick, you don't have to worry about them not coming back and you having to recruit new people. So there are good reasons why it's a business need to do it. So what are the numbers? Well, as I just said, mental health is the number one reason for work-related illness in the UK and is on the rise. Sorry about that. So in Scotland, 68,000 workers suffer from work-related stress, anxiety and depression. In the UK as a whole, it was 822,000 people took time off work due to work-related stress. That is a significant number of people. That is a significant cost to the UK. It's been, in a recent report by Deloitte, it was estimated that mental health issues, so the anxiety and depression and that element of the problem, caused up to £56 billion worth of costs to British industry and the government. So it is a significant amount of money. It sounds like a lot of people, 822,000 across the UK, and Scotland's percentage of it was only 68,000. But when you actually break it down to how many people per 100,000, Scotland's was 2,440 people per 100,000 workers took time off. The whole of the UK was 2,430. So you can see it's a similar problem, even though the size of it sounds ultimately different. So the other thing that has recently impacted on us is the pandemic. And it's probably too early to say what kind of an impact the pandemic's going to have on business as a whole. People are now returning to work. There's some level of normality returning. But Mind did some research, and they've assessed that 2 in every 5 employees have had worsened mental health due to the pandemic. Now, we don't necessarily know what that worsened mental health is. There's some argument to say that being in work is stressful. People don't like the commute. People don't like the people they work with. They don't like the office they have to work in. But then if you're working from home, you've got the loneliness element, you've got the isolation element, you've got the lack of support from your manager because you've got that distance, you've got that separation. So being in work has got problems, being working from home has got problems. So we haven't yet got to the point where we can say whether the pandemic has been a really negative and getting people back into workplaces will be positive, or whether people being working from home has been more positive, or whether it's, as it probably will be, it depends on the individual person involved. So this event is talking about the campaign. So the campaign, as we've said before, HSE cannot do all of this by itself. We've did a major piece of work back in 2004 and produced a tool called the Management Standards. Since then, we've been trying to get people to use the management standards or to do something about work-related stress. Work-related stress, as we've discussed, is a major issue, but there's still a lot of people who don't understand that they have a responsibility or a duty to do something. We did an exercise under COVID where we were doing some what we were calling spot checks, which is effectively phoning up small employees and saying, are you working through the pandemic? Yes, you are. What are you doing around COVID? Have you got hand cleaning provisions? Have you got additional PPE? Are you doing keeping socially distanced and all those kind of things? It became clear that SMEs, the smaller, medium-sized enterprises, so those are the 250 and below, and particularly the smaller ones, the 50 and below, when we contacted them, most of them didn't understand that they had duties of care, either under COVID or when we had the questions about work-related stress either. So within the exercise, we were getting most failures from people's responses were due to the failure to actually do a risk assessment because they didn't understand they had to. Once we directed them to the website and once we directed them to the resources that were available to them and once we directed them to the idea that they should be doing something, they picked it up and ran with it. The website was almost doubled on some of the pages we directed them to. So we know that people were following it up and looking at it. And part of the campaign exercise is to work on that figure, to work on that good work and to look at getting to these other audiences. So working in partnership, and you can see on this slide that's on there, there are a lot of sectors covered, there are a lot of organisations. There are some government departments like ACAS. ACAS do a lot of work around bullying and harassment and the kind of stresses that causes, but they also do an awful lot of work around work-related stress. They also do an awful lot of work around the other psychosocial things, issues about where you're employing somebody who has a pre-existing mental health condition, for example. We're talking about work-related stress and psychological risks, but it's not just the work-related element of it that can be an impact. You might be employing someone who has a mental health condition that they bring in with them, and there is an element for the employer to need to know what to do if that person has an episode, how to prevent that person from having an episode. It's not just about work-related causality, it's also about work-related aggravation. So work can aggravate a pre-existing condition. Again, you can see that we're working with a fair few sectors, but we're also working with the third sector. We're also working with Make UK, who are manufacturing, because currently when you break down the stats that we get from the ONS, it's showing that the same sectors have significantly higher figures year in, year out. And they've been the same for the last about 20 years. But what we've noticed is that behind those figures, lots of other sectors like construction sector, manufacturing sector, the farming sector, the agricultural sector are all now starting to build up and to match those figures. They're getting closer and closer each year. And the growth in the number of work-related stress reports is actually not coming from the ones that you would expect, like the NHS and education, because they're already at higher levels. It's coming from the other sectors starting to catch up with them. So as Sarah and Jill have both said, we're looking to make a culture change in British workplaces. We've said before, we can't do all this by ourselves. We need employees to get involved. We're trying to use the networks of those partner organisations that we've got to work down to those other levels. We're trying to use the campaign website, which is designed specifically for small to medium-sized enterprises, although the information is relevant to every employer. We're trying to talk to people in a slightly different way, making it easier to understand and easier to work the way through. We've tried to cover all the information that relates to SMEs in particular in one place, and so that we can direct them to the one site that they need to. The HSE's work-related stress and mental health website is a really useful tool, but by the nature of the beast, it's got to quite cater for all people. So it starts off looking at a huge, great big organisation that will use the management standards in a whole way. So people who are at the smaller end of the scale feel that they're not getting what they need. So the campaign has been designed to try to meet that need. So as I say, the employees are not necessarily aware of their legal duties, and one of the things we're stressing is that even if you do nothing else, you need to risk assess. You need to look at whether your people are being injured by the workplace. And your risk assessment might be as simple as going out and having a word with the 5 people you employ and saying, how are things? Are you okay? You know, is work causing you any problems? A 20-minute conversation might be all your risk assessment is. Then you just write down that you've had that conversation, nobody's got a problem. You don't need to do anything else apart from set a date for the next review. It's not rocket science, it's not complicated, it's not necessarily very expensive. So, you know, the risk assessment needs to be proportionate to the size of your organisation. You then need to consider going on to do some treatment if you actually identify a risk. So if people say there's a problem, what is that problem and how do we get around it? So the campaign is an approach for finding out that information and working with that information. So the most important thing you can do with your employees is have a conversation. Conversations about work-related stress and anxiety and mental health and psychological risks is useful not only because it gets you the data you need, but it shows you've got an interest. It shows that your business is interested in how its employees are feeling. It shows that there is an interest in improving the workplace. But the other thing it does is it normalizes the conversations. It means that other people are talking about these things. It gives people the confidence that if they're having an issue, they know that they can speak up. A lot of the issues that we get is that there is stigma around it. The old macho industries, the likes of construction, where people are less likely to talk about things, not only because they're in a macho environment, but because they're away from the support networks. So if you imagine a construction worker who's working on HS2s coming down from Glasgow, they're losing the support network of the home environment. They're in a strange place. They're talking. The only people you've got to talk to are other people who are possibly in the same situation. And it's not something you do. You go out and you have a drink. You go out and you have a meal. You go home and that's it. You don't talk about how you feel unless somebody starts talking to you. Unless somebody starts that and initiates that thing. So one of the partners we're working with is an organisation called Mates in Mind, and that's a lot of the work they do. It's around prevention, it's around having those conversations and getting people to talk about it. So the first element of the Working Minds campaign is to reach out. So the thing to remember is that anybody in the organisation can suffer from work-related stress or poor mental health. It's not just the people on the work front, or it's not people who are necessarily lower paid or sort of seem to be more busy. It's also the directors, it's also the company owner. It's anybody within the organisation can be stressed, because stress is a kind of a different hazard in the workplace, because it's not just the workplace stress that causes the problem. If you're stressed in work, you can generally cope with it because when you go home, it's a better environment. You have that recovery time that I've spoken about before. But if you're experiencing stress at home as well, then that cumulative effect can make you iller more quickly. So you're not getting the respite in work from a bad home life. You're not getting a good respite at home from a bad workplace. So the accumulation effect is one of the problems that people don't seem to understand. And when we talk about employers being flexible and helping people, there is no legal duty for an employer to help you with non-work related stresses. But if you don't, if you're an employer and you don't help people who are experiencing problems outside work, what's going to happen? Nobody walks away from home life. Everybody walks away from work. Everybody takes time off sick. So the impact is on the business anyway. So flexibility in talking about things and maybe being a little bit flexible about start and finish times can help people with home problems that can impact on the workplace by making them a happier employee, a happier workplace, and happier workplaces and employees are more productive and more stable. So again, there's a benefit to the employer. So reaching out is about starting the conversation. It's a very important first step. Up until that point, it might have been a taboo subject. Up until that point, people might be suffering. Up until that point, one of your employees might be suicidal. This is the opportunity, and it should be taken at every opportunity to have a conversation and start to face those things. You will already have in most workplaces a system where you will talk to your staff. So you might do an annual review, you might do weekly catch-up or team meetings, you might do monthly meetings, you might have training days, there will be all kinds of opportunities where you can put this on the agenda, where you can speak about it. It doesn't necessarily be an in-depth conversation. It can be a quick 5 minutes, right? We've had a bit of a busy time the last few weeks. How is everybody? Just asking the question could help find out whether there's a problem. So starting that conversation is an essential step. Oh, sorry about this. As I said, I'm using a new computer, so. So the next step is, how do you go about recognising that there's a problem? As I mentioned before, the HSE has developed a tool called the Management Standards. And the Management Standards is a series of factors that, if not properly managed, are likely to lead to work-related stress. And those are the 6 on the right-hand side: demands, control, support, relationships, role and change. And if you think about it logically, demands, if you've got too much work to do, or ironically, if you've got too little work to do, it can become stressful. If you've got little control over your work, so if you come into work and it gets dumped on you and dumped on you and dumped on you and you're expected to do it, you start to feel stressed. If you haven't got support from your line manager or from your colleagues, it becomes isolation, it becomes an us and them situation, it becomes stressful. If you haven't got good relationships in the workplace, so if everybody's at each other's throats, it's stressful. If you don't understand how you fit into a role, if you don't understand what your job is or how your job fits into the overall organisation, it becomes stressful. And particularly with change, if things are being done to you, it becomes stressful. If things are done with you, it becomes less stressful. So this is about recognising how people react to things. So you'll have all kinds of different reactions. You'll have mood swings. People will become more withdrawn. You might notice people being more emotional, being tearful, being aggressive, just not being themselves. You might see people being twitchy. You might see them being nervous. You might see them not wanting to do a specific task because they think they're not going to be able to do it. So, I mean, for example, I don't like doing these kind of events because it's pressure for me. But when I finish this event, I'll go back to my desk and do something that will be less stressful and I'll have that time to recover. But if people are being asked to do things that are stressful to them repeatedly and they don't have the ability to control it and they don't have the ability to say, well, I'll do one today, one tomorrow, but I can't do 2 in a row, they start to be stressed about it. I mean, it's not just with individuals that you'll notice these things, it'll also be in the teams. Jill put up a slide about all the good things about teams. Unfortunately, the way HSE looks at work-related stress because it looks at the damage it can cause. We look at the things that are negative about people. What can be an example of how a person will behave or a team will behave if they aren't working well. So you'll see a lot of complaints and disputes and arguments within the team. Not unusual, you'll say, in lots of teams, but if you start noticing increased amounts, if they start getting more aggressive, if people start becoming more emotional about the reaction to them, or if there's more sickness absence, or if the productivity starts to drop off, or people start complaining, if you're a customer facing organisation and suddenly your customers start complaining about the way somebody's spoken to them on the phone, it becomes an important issue. But it's not just an issue of the temperament of that individual. It might be an indication that there's a problem within that team. So the next thing to do after you've done these elements of talking to people and checking that people are okay is responding to what they've said. So you'll go into work most days and you'll say, how are you doing? How often do you actually listen to what people say? How often do you, if somebody says to you, well, not too good, to be honest, what do you do next? So if somebody says to you, I'm not feeling good, if you pick it up in a conversation, or if you feel that somebody isn't behaving as they would normally, have a conversation and listen to the conversation and then do something about what you hear. So when the HSC talks about risk assessment, we talk about organisational risk assessment. So it's how can you get the organisation to behave in a way that will minimise the impact on the individual workers. But within that, you've also got to accept that there will be times when people will be stressed. So there will be an individual impact that you need to do. And a lot of people use individual risk assessments. So we have a tool on our website which we call the Return to Work interview, but it's the kind of questions that we would ask under the management standards, and you can use that to have a conversation with an individual and say, look, I've noticed you've been a little bit off, or you've been a little bit aggressive, or you've been a little bit more teary than usual. Is there a problem? You know, can we have a discussion about it? Is there anything work-related? You could use that tool to go through and identify any work-related stresses. Again, just having that conversation will make them feel better. If they tell you, well, actually, yeah, it's a bit of, I'm going through a bit of a health problem, but it's nothing to worry about, then again, it relieves your stress, because as a line manager, going through all these conversations and going through all these issues is as stressful on you as it is on the individual. So you need to be looking after the line management structure as well. So as part of the response, you need to look at what can you do to deal with what's been identified. So if you develop a series of action points, if it's with a team, negotiate it with the team, get an agreement across the team as to what you should be doing. They might not work all the time, but if you're trying to implement a change, it's much easier to do it when the team has been involved and agreed with it. They're much more likely to accept what happens next. And the next stage is to reflect. So reflect is the looking at what you've done. Has it worked? If it's worked, brilliant. If it hasn't, do you need to look at it again and have another go? So you might put in place an intervention that cures most of the problem, but they're still niggling a little bit around the edges. So do you need to do something slightly different? Consider whether you need to do something wholly different. If you're going through a piece of change, before you do the change, do a risk assessment. What are going to be the impacts of this change on this team? So if it's one particular team, you can say, right, well, we're going to be changing these particular roles, and that's going to have a knock-on effect for these 3 people. What kind of effect is it going to have? Is it going to make their job easier? Great. Is it going to make their jobs more complicated? Oops. Do we need to do more training? Do we need to have them mentored? Is it something that's going to cause a problem? Do we need more staff? You know, do we need to get a new computer system? Do we need to get a new computer package that will make it easier to do? If you plan it out before you actually make the change, then what you're actually doing is planning out any injury that could have caused to your staff. And that's definitely a positive. And then make it routine. So don't talk about work-related stress once a year. Yeah, it's your annual review. We're not going to talk to you again for another 12 months. But how are you doing this today? How has it been for you today? Have a conversation more regularly, especially if you've got people who are working from home. We've got a system called KIT, which is Keep in Touch. And if people aren't seeing each other, how else are you going to be able to find out how they're doing? So you have a conversation. You can use computers, you can use telephone, you can arrange. I mean, people aren't working in the office, not necessarily because of any risk from COVID anymore, but because it's become more accepted. So you might want to have an actual social event where everybody gets together. You might want to have one-to-ones that are, say, every third one is a face-to-face in a coffee shop just around the corner. There are ways and means by which you can make it easier for them and easier for yourself. And as I say, part of the problem is with managers is that if you have a team of 12 people, this is an awful lot of meetings. So you need to be more supportive of your management teams and your management structures. So here's a list of tips. I'm not going to go through all of them, but as we've said before, this has been recorded, so you can come in and have a look again. But it focuses on start the conversation. And HSE has got a talking toolkit. Now, the talking toolkit is a series of conversations that you can have, which may be awkward to start off with because it's going to be talking about mental health issues. It's going to be talking about work-related stress, anxiety, depression, and other psychosocial risks. But the conversations are important, and it gives them some structure. So the structure of it is that you have a conversation about, in the first conversation will be about, say, demands. So they're broken down by the 6 factors we spoke about earlier. And it's a structure of questions. So that's questions so that people have got the opportunity to feedback on what's going on. And the bottom line of it is, well, what are we going to do about it? So it's important that you have that factor at the end of it. OK, you've just had 20 minutes telling me where all the problems are with work, but what are we going to do about it? And that's important to get them involved in that. What are we going to do about it? Again, if you've got somebody who's stressed because of the amount of work they've done, and you impose something on it, you're not really helping, you're not really relieving that stress, because they will see that as an imposition and will see that as another bit of pressure. So negotiate what you're going to do. Second one, understand the signs and recognise them. We've already spoken about. We haven't spoken so much about the impact of it on the individual. We've spoken about the kind of health conditions that you can have. But though these conditions can be really chronic conditions, so things like IBS can be developed from it. As I said before, diabetes and heart problems. Obesity can be a result of work-related stress. Coping mechanisms for work-related stress can be as damaging, so things like overuse or use of illegal drugs, overuse of alcohol, smoking too much. All those kind of things that people sort of run off to when they're stressed can be as damaging as the stress. So think about those kind of things. A point I haven't really mentioned is that there are duties under other legislation apart from health and safety legislation. So as an employer, you might have a duty to somebody who has a disability under the Equalities Act to make reasonable adjustments for them. So that might be as simple as getting them a chair that allows them to sit in a comfortable position if they got back problems. It might be as if somebody has visual impairment, it can be something like getting a computer system that can read the text to them. But there are other things that you can do around mental health. You can possibly adjust the workload. You can make it for people who've got dyslexia or dyspraxia. There are tools you can get for computers that make it easier. For people who've got mental health issues, you can have an agreement with them that you understand what their mental health condition is. You understand how it impacts on them, and you can do things that will help support them. But also that has information about what an episode of their mental health condition could look like, what the impact on them would be, and what the impact on business could be. What you as a manager or you as an employer should be doing to help support them. So if somebody has epilepsy, for example, It's not all. Epilepsy can include absences. So what do you do if somebody has one of those absences? I used to work in job clubs, and one of the guys who was on our job club had absences, and he worked as a builder, and he was about to walk off a scaffolding at 27 floors up. Thankfully, one of his colleagues spotted him and stopped him before he did. But that ended his career as a builder. But are the things that can be done, or the tasks he could have been doing? So you need to sort of understand that it's not just around health and safety at work, it's also about equality, it's also about things around bullying, harassment, behaviours, it's also around stigma. And all these things are things that you can do something about. If you've got a takeaway from this event, what I would say is work-related stress is a workplace hazard. It can be damaging, but it can be managed, it can be tackled, and it can be prevented. And our goal of trying to get a sea change in the way that people think about work-related stress, anxiety, depression, and psychosocial risks is to get people to understand that and to do things at an early stage so that they actually prevent their people from being injured. And it's easier and quicker and cheaper to solve the problem. So what are HSC's resources? As I say, there's the Work Right campaign and emails are there. Sorry, the URL is there. But we also have an HSC mobile app, which is unfortunately costed, because when we developed it, we had to cost it for it to go onto Google and onto Apple, but it's there and it's available. We have the talking toolkits, which are based around generic one. We've got education ones, we've got health service ones, including one that was negotiated and worked on with an NHS board up in Scotland when we were doing some pilot work. We've got risk assessment templates and examples. These are for particularly smaller organisations, and there's some good examples. We've got the stress management standards, which I've spoken about a couple of times, which are more developed for larger organisations and have a series of tools that takes you through the whole process, includes survey tools, analysis tools, and all the kind of things large organisations would need. But one of the things that we're doing on the campaign is we're trying to build networks. We're trying to build the scope of who we can and do talk to get to those audiences that we've struggled to get to before. So you could become a Working Minds champion for us if you wanted to. If you have a look at the website, there's instructions about how you go about doing that and what the expectations are, both from us and what you can expect from us. So I hope that's been a quick run through, and I hope you found it helpful. We're now moving over to the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks to Jill as well. There've been some questions in the Q&A bar, and some of them we've answered, I hope. Jenny Atkins has been posting links as to how you can become a champion. I just wanted to remind you about the 5 R's. Recognise, respond, reflect, and make it routine, and reach out to start with. Rob talked a lot about reaching out and having those initial conversations, and the recognise reminder is very important, because that's where you link to the management standards, and that's where you can be looking as an organisation at demands, control, support, relationships, the role of the individual, and how you manage change in the organisation. But the 5 R's are designed to simplify all of that. So thanks very much to Rob and Jill. We've got a few minutes left, and what I wanted to do is to come back to our partner, Jill at Lifeline Scotland, and just to ask her if she could give us one example of how a psychological risk was identified, how was it recognised, and what did Lifeline Scotland do to respond to it?
I need to go live. Thanks, Sarah. You know what I'm struck by as we've been talking about this this afternoon is, and I've seen some of the questions in the chat about how do we identify these, and it's really picking up on what Rob's saying. You need to sit down with your colleagues or your teammates and have a conversation about what is it that is stressful at work. And you know, and I would also encourage you to think about what are the things that keep you well at work, but let's just focus on the things that are stressful at work, because some of the things that impact our psychological well-being are actually practical things. So I gave some examples earlier, like perhaps you've got staff who are subject to people being abusive, or they're hearing stories from people who are in distress and having to cope with very distressed people. And so, you know, but it may be, and one of the examples I was thinking of when Sarah put that kind of question in the chat was working with colleagues who drive the neonatal ambulances, yeah, so transporting sick babies. And, you know, we were chatting about what it is that is challenging for them. And it wasn't dealing with, you know, distressed parents and poorly babies. It was worrying that they weren't getting there in time, not stopping to go to the loo because they didn't want to waste time, not having anything to eat, you know, the kind of attitude they might have when they turned up varied in with different hospitals, you know. So sometimes you can have a conversation, you can actually find it's something really specific that is causing stress. And if you can do something about that, so with that one, it may sound a bit facile, but we were basically saying, okay, you do need to go to the loo. How can you work that out? So you've got a shift when you get to the hospital, so someone gets a toilet break. And what do you need to carry so that you've got food, you know, so that someone gets something to eat, so you're not kind of, your blood sugars aren't, you know, dipping. Other ones I can think of is, you know, maybe about shift patterns, and obviously shift patterns can be really good for some people. People might really like the flexibility of a shift pattern. Other times people might be finding shift patterns difficult, disrupting their sleep routine. So I mean, I guess that what I would just really encourage is to have a think about what is it that is causing you or your work colleagues stress, and then have a think, is there anything you can do about that? Now, I saw one of you put in the kind of chat column about what about the cost of living crisis, these stressors that are out with our control. And all I would say is never underestimate the value of acknowledging that there are things that are causing stress that may be out with your control. You know, if you think about your own experience of somebody being supportive to you, sometimes we don't necessarily, I mean, there may be things people would help us problem solve, and that's why we need to do that if we can, but sometimes just someone saying, oh, you're right, that's really tough just now. Okay, so we can't do anything about that, but is there something we can do about this? So maybe that sounds a bit too vague, but you know, so you could do specific things like make sure you've got welfare benefits advice and that people are claiming everything they can, or they know what discounts are available to them and their families, or you know, there may be very specific things you can do, but sometimes it may be having a conversation as an employer or as a manager that says, look, these are difficult times for everybody. Is there anything you think we can do that might help? That could be about flexibility, about home or office working, you know, just having, you know, making sure people know that they can claim an allowance for working at home in terms of their sort of tax and stuff. So I would just really encourage you to take a very pragmatic approach, just really say, sit down with people and say, what are the things that are doing our heads in? And is there anything we can do about those? And as I say, it can be anything from having food that people can get to thinking about shift patterns to, with the ambulance service, again, it was making sure people had kind of light PPE, light clothing they could wear under the PPE, because actually what was causing a lot of stress was their kit wasn't geared to wearing PPE. So what are the things that are causing your people stress, and is there anything you can do about that? And if not, just say, thank you for still dealing with that. We can't sort it just now, but I really appreciate that you are working in those conditions, and we're going to do the best we can to address it as soon as we can. I don't know if that's helpful.
It's very helpful. Thank you very much, Jill. Well, that brings us almost to the end of our hour, everybody. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. Sorry we don't have more time for questions. Jenny's kindly put a lot of the links in the Q&A bar, but please do visit the Work Right campaign Working Minds website, and you'll find a lot of the information that we've been talking about there. Please do sign up to become either a partner or to champion the campaign. We very much welcome more champions from within Scotland. And thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.